Okay, so it has been a while, but we are back, and the reason I wanted to do this is a quick update because about the last time you saw one of these videos, I was telling you the reality of what was, from the intelligence of the best part of a year and a pandemic ago, that the people really don't use eSIMs in physical devices, and that intelligence was our own intelligence from years of experience, mainly with even dual SIM devices, where if there was a physical SIM, people were quite happy to put two physical SIMs in, but the eSIM slot, for example, in the iPhones, until recently and before the pandemic, people were not that happy to do, and it's quite simple to see why if you wind back a bit. GSMA won over the CDMA war, the Betamax VHS, because the identity was on the SIM. And if you think about it, CDMA almost was like an eSIM in that the identity was held not on a physical SIM card but in the device itself. And what that does is it creates simplicity for the customer. So the customer knows exactly, this SIM, this phone. If I give you the SIM in the phone, then you can make calls. If I give you just the SIM card, you can make calls at my expense. If I give you just the phone without the SIM card, I can't, right? So it created a nice, simple physical barrier. However, times move on, and a pandemic can have an amazing effect on how business is done. The digitalization has been accelerated massively for all sorts of businesses. And essentially what we are now seeing is a huge acceptance, both for all types of customers to have an eSIM. And this has been caused by a few things. One of them has been the fact that people want more insurance SIMs and the practicalities of that. So we spent a huge first 3 months of the 6 months of the pandemic running around like crazy, trying to get huge volumes of SIMs, physical SIMs, out of the door, which a large amount of those have ended up as insurance SIMs. People are keeping them just in case all the networks go down, which is quite wise to do. But as we've seen, the networks haven't really gone down. They've, touch wood. We've all been pretty much up and running and managing this extra data and the extra traffic and the extra growth and the extra dependency quite well. But what we have seen is that people do want that. They do want that reassurance. We've also seen, so that's one thing, we've also seen a lot of people displaced, I think is a way of saying it. So there were a lot of people who maybe, for example, in Europe, the stats are roughly 10% of European Union members work and live in another member state. And we've seen some of them move back, but they're still waiting to come back to wherever they were. And so they're keeping for example, their British physical SIM, but where they've gone back home, they're using an eSIM or vice versa. And this has been pretty universal. The next side of it is just we don't know. Obviously, there's been a lot of people trying to shift online, and there is just simply no way we can predict or amass. I mean, previously we have managed quite large. I mean, the biggest SIM inventories that I've seen any MVNE have, and the reason we could do that is because we have the flexibility to reprogram them to multi SKU, we can change these SIMs very quickly on the fly. But even with our flexibility, when we don't know when the market is going to pick up again, and when travel does pick up, obviously the consumer travel is going to pick up massively. We don't know how the business travel is going to pick up, but it is going to pick up. And everybody wants a SIM card, and the only way to really manage that is through eSIM. There's no way that we can, forecasts. Whereas forecasts before were between, they had a margin maybe of 1 0. Now we have margins of 2 zeros, and eSIM really is the only way to do that. We're then also following the network operators are seeing this demand take up, and obviously they're key parts of any MVNO plan. I mean, a lot of MVNOs like to think that they can operate independently, but we are very dependent on the MNOs, and they are seeing a lot of people, these people who have been displaced, people trying to get another SIM. But if we look forward to the fact that we're now putting in 5G infrastructure, a lot of things are being questioned. and a lot of the legacy has gone. And so whereas before we maybe had 3G SIMs with a 4G 4G files added onto them, now we're looking at going at 4G and 5G SIMs going forward. And when you look at that, well, then you look at the EEIUC SIM and the eSIM profile and go, well, actually now I can have an eSIM manifest itself in a physical SIM, in a EEIUC SIM. So there are all sorts of things have been questioned as well. For example, voice. Should I invest in a voice platform going forward in a 5G infrastructure? Because for the few people who are not making calls over VoIP, and the same is of SIM cards. There is clearly a move as people modernize their platforms to move to more modern supporting infrastructure, and we're definitely seeing that. But again, unfortunately, this market has a big history of trying to take a technology and push it to the customer. And we've seen this with 4G and 3G. It took way longer than expected because essentially the customer's going, well, I don't actually see the benefit. But what we are seeing now is actually it is customer-led. We tried for the best will in our world for over 2 years to try and push to a lot of and our customers to a lot of iPhone specific people who had the eSIM and they just weren't interested. When the physical dual SIMs came along in mass market, both on Android and on iPhone, then people were very happy, as I said at the beginning of this video, to have the 2 physical SIMs. They were really reluctant to have the eSIM, but this is changing very, very, very rapidly, and it is because of the situation we now live in. And I don't know if it's aspirational in the fact that we've been locked in for so long that we want to have an eSIM for just in case. A bit like the watch that goes down to 200 meters when we don't even dive. But even if you dive, you're never going to go down to 200 meters. But we're seeing it happen, and it's a huge change, and it's a change that we really welcome. And I mean, it makes life a lot easier. As we always said before, we basically dealt. A lot of people try to be an eSIM provider, and it's a big problem because many people can just do eSIM, and what they mean, it's a bit like people saying I can do email. Well, yeah, you've got Outlook and you can send an email, but that's very different to having like a MailChimp email platform or an email management platform. And so there's no point having eSIMs that you can program onto a SIM and then nobody can ever do anything with that SIM. You need to have a proper platform, and in this sense we've always dealt with eSIM manufacturers and SIM manufacturers in the same way, saying we give you the input files, we take the output files, and we put them onto our system. But obviously we've now put over 100 brands onto our platform, and there are very few of our customers who have the manpower to be able to take on that process. SIMs are incredibly complex. I mean, they are. I've done this now for 20 years, and every time we have to go through a SIM process, it is, oh really, do we have to do this now? It takes a massive amount of mental firepower and discipline to be able to get it done properly, and even then, problems can happen. It's a very strenuous process, and so, yeah, I mean, the fact is that a lot of brands didn't really have the ability to either develop their own physical SIMs, let alone eSIMs. And eSIMs do have a bigger barrier to entry. A lot of people are wrongly attracted to eSIMs because they think they're cheaper or they're easier. They're not. They're a lot more complex, and the barrier to entry is higher. Whereas most physical SIM manufacturers will make SIMs, a minimum order of probably 10,000 SIMs. With eSIMs, I mean, you may get someone to try and do that if they're doing some kind of hack where they're sending them, but then you can't do anything with them. But a proper eSIM platform has an entry cost and a management cost, and realistically we see the barrier still at 100,000 SIMs. So it's out of the reach of a lot of people. But long story short, whereas we got an inventory stock of physical SIMs and managed them for customers before, and we weren't willing to do both an eSIM and a physical SIM inventory, right now, as we move to 5G and the next generation platforms, well then, and EEIUC SIMs, then it doesn't really matter. We can have an eSIM profile and put those onto physical SIMs for customers who need it. But I mean, if we're here for the massive demand and take up, which again, touch wood, we will have in 2021 or 2022, or both, or some of a mix, and going back into lockdown, out of lockdown, then we need eSIM, and it's basically the way to go. It's the way the market's going, and I just thought I would do this video very quickly to put that out there. I think is important to clarify is this is not a mass shift from physical SIMs to eSIM. What this is the fact that the situation that is being presented to us is creating a situation where the process of moving to eSIM is being brought forward, like many digital transformations that have happened over the last 6 months. And what that means is that typically what an eSIM will not be a substitute. These are not, the growth that we're seeing is not substitute SIMs, so people are still keeping their MNO SIM. And what we're seeing now, whereas before when people would travel, maybe only, I don't know what the percentages are, but to give an example, if it was 5% of people who were traveling, or 10% of people who are traveling were getting a second SIM or a travel SIM. Now, because of the nature of travel and lockdowns being called again and not being able to get home, etc. Now, pretty much everybody who's traveling wants to make sure that they're able to contact people and be able to rearrange their flights, etc. if a lockdown's announced. Whatever it is, people want to be able to stay communicated and communicate more, and maybe even just tell people more where they are, right? Because even if you do go on holiday, you're probably leaving family members behind who were not fortunate enough to be able to move or to risk traveling in a pandemic. And yeah, so this is basically eating into that second, we're seeing a transformation of the second SIM market, but the eSIM is really necessary for this, because the proportion of those SIMs that are actually being active at any given time is a lot lower than it typically was. And so whereas before in a physical SIM you had to put all of the IMSIs that you would maybe need to have for that SIM for the duration of its time, with the eSIM you can pull those across the ones that are actually active. So it's interesting times. So I hope this helps. I hope you found this interesting. I wanted to share this with you as quickly as it's sort of happening, and as quickly as we've been quiet, obviously, over this period. There've been difficult times for everybody, and I think the last thing you need is somebody harping on. In the UK, where I'm speaking from right now, we have just headed into a month-long lockdown again, but it is very different from the last lockdown, where I didn't know if my shopping was bringing in a deadly virus or not, and the world is moving online. And talking of that, you'll be seeing more of us online as we go forward, and more of us on YouTube. Yeah, aren't you lucky? So I look forward to it, at least. I hope you do as well. And yeah, so do make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification button, because there's going to be some interesting stuff coming online, not just videos. You are going to like it a lot more, because we're not able to, in the industry, get out and meet as we used to, and so we need to find other ways to do that. And we've been innovating in all sorts of ways, as we do as a company, in how we interact with our customers, and so we'll be doing more of this going forward. So I look forward to it, and I hope you do as well.